Bore da, croeso. Good morning and welcome to this World Parkinson's Day research event. My name is Pat Cleary and this, somewhere, is Nigel Blackwood. We are both volunteer members of the Welsh Research Interest Group. I live in South Wales and Nigel lives in North Wales. For those of you who do not know what the group is, I'd like to give a brief description. Following this, Nigel will give you an outline of today's event. We are a friendly, dynamic group of people who are affected by Parkinson's and keen to support research that can improve the quality of people's lives on a day-to-day basis, alongside the research for a cure and interventions that can slow the progress of the condition. We aim to increase an awareness and understanding of what research can mean for people with Parkinson's and those around them, and to encourage participation in all kinds of research, from drug trials to questionnaires. We are not able to recommend or validate specific required treatments, but aim to increase awareness. And most importantly of all, I want you to listen carefully to this paragraph. As a research interest group, we want to ensure that the priorities for Parkinson's research are informed by the people affected by Parkinson's from all across Wales, and that the research is for our direct benefit. This is why today's event is being held, and also why we need you. And when I say you, I mean all you people who are not actually involved in the research, but those of you who are part of the Parkinson's community. And many of you don't actually take part, and we want you to take part for the reasons just said. They need these researchers to be directed, and we need to make sure that what they are doing is of benefit to us. We also share information on the latest treatments, academic articles, many freely available to the public, and policies that can potentially improve the quality of life for all of those affected by Parkinson's. Over to you, Nigel.
Thank you, Pat. As I'm sure you realise, we're doing two simultaneous in-person events in Bangor and Cardiff, with both venues connected via video. The event has been planned by the Welsh Research Interest Group in very close collaboration with Dr. Lucia Cardio in Cardiff and Dr. Lucy Brining here in Bangor, who are researchers into Parkinson's. So whilst World Parkinson Day was on the 11th of April, I'm sure you all know that, we felt we could stretch this into May to run this event. We will have a number of scientific presentations. Please don't worry, the content and language are accessible and in plain English. We are grateful to all the contributors and speakers, including Professor Rebecca Crane from Bangor, Dr. Jeff Davis from Swansea, and Dr. Emma Lane from Cardiff. Today's event is more than holding information lectures. It will have an element of interaction, and excitingly, it also marks the official launch of Sparky Samba in Cardiff, a project led by people with Parkinson's to provide a fun and engaging musical percussion activity. Samba provides driving rhythms with complexity to challenge the brain and is an excellent exercise with distinct easing of stiffness of movement. As important, the project will be subject to an evaluation research to contribute to the validating body of knowledge in this area. Sparky Samba is very grateful to the Arts Council of Wales for their funding support. Unfortunately, we will not be able to take part in the Samba session here in Bangor. Instead, we will have a Dance for Parkinson's session run by the National Dance Company of Wales. In addition, we will have a North and South interactive mindfulness taster session for all attendees at both venues. I would also like to draw your attention to one of our partner organisations that has people attending the event. AbilityNet is a charity that supports older and disabled people to use technology and aims to create a digital world accessible to all. Parkinson's UK and AbilityNet have joined forces to help people with Parkinson's to learn how to use digital devices with confidence, and it's all for free. So in Bangor, you can speak to Glyn, who's here, and in Cardiff, where you can speak with Jordan. Please look out for them during the coffee and lunch breaks. You may well benefit, or you may know somebody who could do. I hope you have a truly enjoyable day. I am really looking forward to this. So I'd like to hand over back to Cardiff to Dr. Cynthia Sandor.
Thank you. Yep, all good.
Microphone is open.
Very good.
Hello? Okay. First, I would like to thanks to come here and thanks to transform Cardiff University in the Carnival of Rio. Welcome to the Dementia Research Institute in Cardiff, but not just Cardiff. We have 7 Dementia Research Institutes across UK, and there is 800 researchers that work on the Dementia Research Institute. The thing, our purpose in the Dementia Research Institute is not necessarily to try directly to find a drug, but to understand the mechanism of the drug, to try to understand the mechanism of the disease and the Parkinson. And the second thing also that is very important for us is to understand who and when we need to treat people. And we use different types of data. The first thing that we use is we start with the clinical data. After we try to examine what are the genetics associated with this clinical data, and after to understand the mechanism, we test this in different models. We use iPS line, we use mice, and we use fly, for example. One of important part of our job is to analyze this data. Especially me, I'm a computational biologist, and we have different types of data that come from the lab. But recently, we just see that actually, currently you are processing a data that enable us to understand very well Parkinson, is your own device, is your iPhone, or your Apple Watch, or your Fitbit. And I would like to give the opportunity to Ann-Kathrin Schalkamp to present her work. She has a very, very exciting story to tell you that's going to be soon published in one of the most prestigious journals, Nature Medicine.
Hello, everyone. So as Cynthia just said, I'm going to talk about digital devices, and I'm going to focus on early diagnosis. So I'm going to tell you now why it's important to have an early diagnosis for Parkinson's. So as you are all aware, there's currently no treatment, right? And most research focuses on this clinical stage of Parkinson's. So where you already have all these motor symptoms and where you have already lost 50% of your dopaminergic neurons. So the cells in your brain that are controlling your movement. And treatment hopes are currently focusing on preserving as many neurons as possible because it's really, really hard to actually insert new neurons in your brain to grow them. So our hope is to save as many as possible. And to save as many as possible, we have to look at the time before the diagnosis. And we can see that before the diagnosis, the dopaminergic neurons are decreasing for a long period before the actual symptoms appear. So some 15 years or so before your diagnosis, it's already changing in your brain. And with this long latent phase, there are currently, sadly, no markers for these early stages of the disease that are specific enough to have actually an early recognition of the disorder. And this hinders our drug development because we just aren't able to recruit the right people to the clinical trials to test out these drugs preserving neurons. So how do we currently identify people early? What's currently done? Because a lot of research is being done. And this is the current most up-to-date way to do it. And it's conveniently in this web-based application. So we would scroll through and put in a lot of information about your age, about lifestyle factors, like how many cups of coffee you drink per day, about genetic factors. Then it asks for a lot of prodromal markers. So if you have REM behavioral sleep disorder, if you have depression or olfactory dysfunction. Then it also asks if you have already some motor symptoms appearing in early stages, and also if you have already a decline of dopaminergic neurons in your brain. And it integrates all of that into a probability that you have this early stage of Parkinson's disease. But that is all good and fine, but what's the problem with this? So the problem is that the most informative features in here are REM behavior sleep disorder and the DUT scan, so how many neurons you still have. And these features require really expensive testing. So for REM behavior sleep disorder, you have to go into a sleep clinic, spend a night there attached to lots of different, very expensive tools. And for DUT scan, you have to have brain imaging. And this is just not accessible to do in the general population for this early screening. And the other markers I've just listed are just not that specific. So constipation and depression, they all occur in the general population. So it's not really an indicator if you have Parkinson's or are going to get Parkinson's. And another crucial thing is that you can't continuously monitor for these markers because it's just too expensive to do a DUT scan every 6 months. So we need an alternative. And the one I'm proposing is based on smart devices. And the nice thing about smart devices is that it can give you lots of information continuously. So in a normal setup, you would go into a clinic, have a test done, and it would state whether you're in the healthy range or if you're in the disease range. And then some months later, you go in again and repeat that test. But if you were to a smartwatch and just this would collect data day to day, you would have more information about the day-to-day variation. And you would see that, for example, in this case, if the person would have gone into the follow-up just 3 days later, the person would have been in the disease range and probably been diagnosed with the disorder. So we have this information continuously available. So we also see early warning systems whether a marker is increasing. And smart devices provide lots of information. So your smartwatch you're currently wearing, if it's equipped with an accelerometer sensor that just measures your movement, you can see whether how much time you spend sedentary, how much time you spend very active during your day, at what time you go to bed and how often you wake up. And that's a lot of information that can be used to see if Parkinson's is going to occur. Because, so I was interested in comparing this new setup of smartwatches with the currently established ones. And I studied this in the UK Biobank. The UK Biobank collected data for 500,000 people aged 40 to 69. And the crucial part is it continues its updates on diagnosis. So we have the lifetime information about what diagnosis every person in this data set got. And they also collected data with smartwatches. So based on this, I identified 3 different groups. The healthy group, which up until today hasn't gotten a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. And then also a prodromal group, which got a diagnosis after the data was collected. So during the data collection, they were in these early stages. So they didn't have the hallmark motor symptoms, but they had the early stage, the prodromal one. And then also a diagnosed group, which got the diagnosis before the data was collected. So they were in the disease stage. And if we look at the movement during a day, so you see all the hours of the day and how the average movement during these hours, you can see during nighttime, not much is happening because you're just not moving. But during daytime, you can see a vast difference between the controls and the people affected with Parkinson's. But crucially, you can also already see this reduction in people who do not have a diagnosis yet, but are going to get it. So we can see a reduction prior to and after diagnosis. And we were interested if this also occurs in other diseases. So we investigated dementia, we investigated other movement disorders like dystonia and osteoarthritis. And none of these show this reduction prior to diagnosis. So we have potentially a very specific marker. So now for the crucial test. Is this data capable of identifying on an individual level whether someone is going to get a diagnosis in the future? So I selected all data relevant, and I identified 5 modalities. So the ones I presented before that are currently being used, like genetics and family history. lifestyle, about smoking history, pesticide exposure. Then also the prodromal symptoms, so constipation and depression, REM behavior sleep disorder. Then also blood biochemistry, like how are your levels of vitamin D in your blood? And then also the smartwatch data. And when we test this on data, so we assess the performance of a model trained with these data sets. And the performance is measured in how many people are correctly identified as controls and how many people are correctly identified as cases. And the higher this number, the better. And you can see that the prodromal symptoms category and the smartwatch category perform better than the others, but about the same. But this is not really a setting which is like representing the real world, because in the real world, we don't have one person that's healthy for every person that is going to get the disease, because the diagnosis of Parkinson's is much more sparse. So we repeated this in another setting where we have all healthy controls included. So we have, for every person that is going to get a diagnosis, we have many, many people who are not going to get it. And you can see here in this much harder task that there is already a slight difference between the categories, and the smartwatch data is performing better. And now the most interesting finding we had is in the general population, because in the general population, not everybody is healthy. We have people who are going to get other disorders, people who have already been diagnosed with dementia or with osteoarthritis. And this is the setting where we would want to apply our screening tool. And you can see here that only the smartwatch data is specific enough to detect people who are going to get a diagnosis. And all the others are just not specific enough. So it's the only one that can detect prodromal Parkinson's in the general population. So I hope I have showed you that there is a unique reduction in movement prior to the diagnosis of Parkinson's, and that smartwatch data can help us predict future diagnosis of Parkinson's disease more accurately than any other modality currently being used in the general population. So what this means is that we can screen for Parkinson's by just letting people wear smartwatches, and then based on that data, identify high-risk individuals and low-risk individuals, and then finally recruit these people who are at high risk and probably are currently using some of their dopaminergic neurons and probably will get the diagnosis in the future to these clinical trials testing for neuroprotective treatments, because these are the ones that will benefit the most. And as Cynthia said, this is currently newly been accepted. And if you're very curious, you can already exit it online. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. That was fabulous. If anyone wants to ask questions, we're going to have a Q&A session after the next couple of short presentations. So hold on to those questions as we go through. I just want to say how wonderful it is to have everybody back here in person. It's lovely to see some familiar faces from events that we've done, and hello to everybody in Bangor as well. It's wonderful to do this joint event. The Dementia Research Institute is housed in the building that we're in Cardiff, and we also here house the Brain Unit, which I'm part of. I would say this is led by Liam Gray and Anne Rosser, who are both clinicians. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Brain Unit before introducing Charlie to come and talk to you about her research. So the Brain Unit here is really about looking at the next steps from this wonderful presentation that we've just heard from about how we can identify Parkinson's disease earlier on. How can we then look at treating Parkinson's that is currently here now for people who have a current diagnosis of Parkinson's? How can we try and progress those therapies? So the Brain Unit is set up with people living with disease right at the heart of it. We have a group of individuals who help guide the way this research works. But this really looks at how we can try and help bridge the gap between research and clinical delivery of new therapies. So what we need to look at with very new treatments is that they might need to be delivered directly into the brain. How are we going to do that? What systems do we need to directly deliver treatments into the brain? So Liam is a neurosurgeon, and he's leading on how we do this, what's called intracranial delivery. How do we deliver drugs directly into the brain in a safe way? To do that, we need a dedicated hospital unit. We need dedicated beds that people can come in for assessments, that people can come in for treatment. So we have a dedicated research unit within the hospital with expertise in looking after people with Parkinson's, Huntington's disease, multiple sclerosis, and epilepsy. We can also use these tools to try and collect more data, to work closely with people who are in the Dementia Research Institute, to try and understand what is happening to the brain tissue. We can take cells, we can bank tissue that we have, and we can use that tissue to create models using human cells in the laboratory. And that's what the Human Tissue Lab and the biobanking do. But around all of this, and at the heart of this, are people living with Parkinson's disease, as I said, who help us guide the research. To do all of the science that underpins this and to try and look for new treatments for Parkinson's disease, I work in the brain repair group with Anne Rosser and with Mariah Leilos. And Charlie's from that group, and she's going to tell you a bit about her work, looking at new therapies that will be delivered into the brain that use cells and genetics to try and influence the way our brains work and hopefully try and develop a treatment for Parkinson's disease using these tools. And they're tested in animals. Someone mentioned to me earlier, oh, what's happening with those experiments you told us about in monkeys in Japan? And it was really exciting to be able to say that's now progressed to a clinical trial. I think I can truly say at this moment in time, it's one of the most exciting times for Parkinson's. We went through quite a period of time, which I think was a bit pessimistic about whether we could have new treatments for Parkinson's. Right now, there's a huge amount happening and a lot on the horizon with people in this room leading some of that research. So I'm going to indulge a little bit and just tell you a little bit about some of what I'm doing to try and bring people with Parkinson's disease to the centre of that research. Because you might be a little bit surprised to find out that when you volunteer to take part in a clinical trial, you might think that someone would talk to you about your experience on that trial. Unfortunately, what we found is that that doesn't happen very often. And you might go through a clinical trial and give lots of your time, lots of your samples, lots of your energy to the trial and committing your time to that at a cost to you. So what we've been doing is talking to people who've taken part in trials in Bristol and in Cambridge and in Sweden about their experiences of actually being on a trial, because then maybe we can encourage more of you to take part in trials, because we can make that process less daunting, we can make it less scary, we can make it more accessible, and we can provide you with the right information that you need when you're thinking about taking part in a trial. What questions do you need to ask? How you might take part in different elements of that trial, what it might mean for you as an individual. And this is a programme of ongoing work looking at lots of different aspects of these quite big trials. If you're going to deliver something into your brain, there might be a lot of questions that you need to ask, and there might be a lot of concerns that you have. How can we best arm you with the tools and resources that you need to make an informed decision about taking part in these trials, and then to have a positive experience when you're going through them? So that's just a little bit of a flavour and a little bit of a promotion, because if you want to get involved in guiding the research that we're doing, you can join Brain Involve, which is our public and patient involvement group that sits at the heart of the Brain Unit. So if you're interested, please do feel free to email us or contact us, and we would love to hear from you. And it's a very friendly, very open group, and they're guiding the research that we do. But I'm going to move on to the next piece of research, which is Charlie, and she's going to tell you a bit about how she is looking at some of these new cell and gene therapies and what they might mean. So Charlie, if you'd like to come down, and then, as I said, remember any questions that you've got, and we'll come back after Charlie's presentation to answer any questions.
Hey, hi everybody, I'm Charlie, and I am a PhD student and research assistant within the Brain Repair Group with Emma. And today I want to talk to you about a bit of research that we're doing in part of the lab. So some of the topics that I want to cover are things such as cognitive behaviours, why they matter for Parkinson's, what's dopamine replacement, which is the field that I work within, and a tool that I use is gene therapy. A brief overview, just one slide of some of the research that I've done, and a take-home message at the end. So when we talk about Parkinson's, we often present forward with the motor symptoms, but I want to focus on the cognitive symptoms. So what do I mean by a cognitive behaviour? So this is something that is the ability for you to think, to plan, to learn, to make decisions. And there's three that I want to focus on today. So the first one is visuospatial function. So this is your ability to tell where objects are in space. So this is a really important function. So if you imagine tying your shoelaces or drawing a picture, you have to know where things are and how they interact. Another is attention. So this is applying sustained focus to a task. So if you imagine a race car driver waiting for that light to turn green so they can jump off the line, they have to be really fine focus. And you may be familiar here to the Stroop test. So you have words that are different colours to what the word would mean. So you may be asked to read what the word is or what the colour is. And then another is motivation. So this is quite broad, but it's the willingness for you to engage in an activity. So that's getting out of bed in the morning, that's making yourself a cup of tea. It's that act, is that you wanting to have a go at that activity. So why am I talking about this? So it was kind of mentioned in the previous talk. So these cognitive symptoms can occur earlier than motor symptoms. So I think it's really important that we address all parts of the disease. And there's also a lack of targeted treatments. So we need to make sure if we go forward with therapeutic intervention, we're covering all aspects. And those three that I mentioned, they can be dopamine dependent. So we know that in Parkinson's, you have that loss of dopamine in the system. And if these are caused by the loss of dopamine, we have a way to target them. So what is dopamine replacement? So this is literally putting dopamine back into the brain. So one way I do this is through gene therapy. So you may not be familiar, this is a rodent brain, and this brown staining here is a marker for dopamine. So when everything is going okay, you have this nice brown staining that's even on both sides. I can create an animal model and deplete dopamine on one side of the brain, and you can see there's absolutely nothing there. But if I then use a gene therapy on this side, you can see the levels of dopamine, those brown stainings have returned, and this is a cell here that's now producing it. But what do I actually mean by gene therapy? So this is a method of modifying DNA, so modifying the instructions of making something to change what it makes, and hopefully we can improve symptoms through this task. So this is the way that I do it. So over here, this is how we make dopamine. So this happens within your dopaminergic cells, but this is the action that's lost when those cells die off. So what I focus on here, so you have these two building blocks that are important, TH and GSH1, in creating dopamine at the end. So what we can do, we can take these and put them inside a virus. We then take that virus and we transplant it into the brain, so into the striatum, which is the area that's most affected by that loss of dopamine. And you can see here that then now these blue cells will now become little factories for making dopamine, where this one, which wasn't targeted, won't. So some of the benefits of gene therapy is that we can focus it to a specific area. It's not going to spread, so we can target it to one specific region if we want to. There'll also be a continuous supply of dopamine. So with levodopa, you may be familiar that you can have this on and off, where this influx of taking the drug. But with this cell is going to continuously pump out dopamine. And this method of using gene therapy is also in clinical trials. So it's important that I want to look at every different aspect of this as a therapy. So this is the way I did it. So I wanted to answer the question, can gene therapy improve cognitive impairments in a rat model? So firstly, what I did is I took rats and I trained them on this cognitive task. So this cognitive task is able to look at the spatial function, attention, and motivation all within one task. I won't go into massive detail, but just to say it's a full task where we train rats to poke their nose into a little hole and they get a sugary reward at the end. So once they're good at this task, I then create a lesion model of Parkinson's, and then I deliver that virus into the brain and see if there's any improvements in a motor or this cognitive task. So just to kind of talk you through the data here. So this is the motor behavior task. So it's just a task where we count how many steps the rats do across the table. And this black bar down here is the animals that didn't receive treatments, and these two did. And you can see you've got this improvement over time. And then if we go to the cognitive behavior, you can see this is the accuracy. So this is how well they can do this task. This black bar down here does nothing. So the different groups here are just different regions that we've put this virus into. The yellow bar, we didn't see an improvement, but in this orange bar, you can see that improving in how well they're doing this task by 8 weeks. And also in this is a measure of motivation. So how many trials the animal participates in, how much they want to get their reward, and that is improved over time. So that's me for today. So I just want to kind of, the take-home message is to show that cognitive symptoms are an important part of Parkinson's, we need to make sure that we're looking at them and that we're including them if we want any sort of therapeutic intervention. And hopefully I've shown you a little bit of work that gene therapy can improve both motor and cognitive impairments. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So what we're going to... Okay, so we've got a few minutes now for questions. Please don't worry if you have any questions that aren't answered now. All of our researchers are going to be around, so please feel free to nab them in the coffee breaks. Feel free to catch them during the table sessions as we move around after lunch. But does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask now? I'm over here, guys. You did wonderful presentations, thank you. So does anyone have any questions for any of us, and that's including Cynthia as well, about the work that's happening? We've got a question here, and also in Bangor, if there's any questions from there, perhaps. I can't see the... Oh, we can check up here. So Lucy, you can maybe type some messages in the box, in the chat box, if we've got any questions from Bangor. But we've got a question here.
The information you've given us today has been fascinating and encouraging, but there's no way I'm going to remember all this. So are you giving notes at the end, or details how to get in touch with people, how to get on board with these different things? I'm going to pick these up, but is it in here, or are we going to give them?
So you can get lots of information through the Wales Research Interest Group, and that has a regular newsletter that goes out that is organised by some of the people in the room today. So I think that's the best way of us sending information out. But I think we can send a summary out through Parkinson's UK from today. And the sessions are being recorded so that you'll be able to review that, and we're looking at how we can share that most effectively with you after the event, so you will be able to review everything that we're doing. But again, please feel free to contact us if you want more information, and we can make sure we share that with you.
Contact details.
Absolutely.
Can I just ask one question? Is it cost going to be prohibitive for gene therapy?
It's a really good question. What I can tell you is at the moment it's looking like no. There are lots of industries that there's lots of companies that are interested in developing both cell and gene therapies, and there's the possibility that some of those will come to Cardiff. We've got state-of-the-art neurosurgical techniques here, so there is the possibility that some of those will be happening here, so Welsh patients will potentially be able to access those trials, but at the moment there is enough interest which suggests that those costs won't be prohibitive actually, but what we'll need to do is prove that they work, and then they'll need to be adopted in the UK.
The drug companies themselves are going to go for it.
Drug companies themselves are currently working on this. So big pharma companies are adopting and looking at gene therapy strategies for other diseases, but they're also looking at them in Parkinson's disease as well. So it's becoming a lot more of a potential reality. We're still a little bit of a way off, but there are clinical trials happening now for gene therapy in Parkinson's disease.
When you talk,
Sorry, we've got a question over here, I think.
people or people.
So this is in people. We've got trials. So the work that's happening in animals is moving into clinical trials in people. So at the moment, these are safety trials. So they're very early stage trials, but they are literally currently happening. A gene therapy trial in the US has just closed, and they're looking at the next stage of their intervention. So these are literally ongoing as we speak. Goodness me, we've got lots of questions.
What kind of results are we getting?
So at the moment they're very... Of course. So the question was about the trials that are happening, whether they're happening in with gene therapy, whether they're happening in animals or in humans. So they're in humans in the US at the moment. That data looks like these interventions are safe, and that's what those studies are designed to show. But they're looking positive. They were released at a conference that I was at just a few weeks ago. So watch this space, and these are things that we can try and keep you updated on. I'm just checking to see whether we've got any questions coming through from Bangor at the moment.
Can I ask if you include stem cell research and gene therapy?
So stem cell research is also happening at the moment. So again, there are trials happening in Europe and in the US at the moment for stem cell therapies. And again, there are industries there are companies who are looking to develop. This started very much as academic research in universities, but now it's expanded up into companies, and there are trials happening at the moment. And we're peripherally involved in one of those trials happening between Cambridge and Sweden, and we're going to be talking to the participants of those in those trials. So they are happening, and we've got.
Is stem cell therapy or research the only likelihood, and that's improving our condition rather than just holding it in place?
So the question is whether stem cell therapy is the only hope for improving the condition rather than holding it in place. The answer to that is there are lots of potential therapies on the horizon at the moment. Some of those are gene therapy, some of those are cell therapy, but there are lots of different approaches being looked at the moment. So they're not the only one. They're the best what we call reparative or restorative measures. So one of those is the best likelihood of actually improving the condition. But there's a lot going on in the field currently. We've got a question at the back there.
I done a clinical trial, and nobody asked me. You say that's called participants. Nobody, wouldn't even know how to do it. Nobody asked me. I done a GGNF trial, and nobody asked me for feedback. I wouldn't even know how to get nobody.
Can I talk to you after? Because I'd like to talk to you a bit more, if that's okay, because I would very much like to hear what your experience was.
Yeah, I'm happy to tell you.
Fantastic. I would find me afterwards. Yeah, at the back.
I saw on the previous research that there was a survey study on the use of smartphones, not with regards to your presentation earlier on, but with regards to how it could be helpful towards people that have Parkinson's as opposed to diagnosis. I couldn't get on it, but unfortunately, but I just wondering if we're aware of any results that might have come from that.
Yeah, so so the question is about how smartphones can also help people who already have the diagnosis. And there are a lot of apps currently being implemented, and a lot of research being done to help monitor and track the disease, so that you can see how the motor symptoms progress over time. And crucially, they are also investigating the medication information within that, so that you can improve the timing of your medications, right? So that at the right time you get a new dosage, so that your symptoms are held at this constant level. And they are looking very promising that it can help improve the medication timing and how much medication should be given. And it's generally really helpful for clinicians to see this continuous monitoring of your symptoms over time. So that's also very helpful. And there are lots of other apps and smartwatch applications and so on that can help you during your daily life. And we have a scientific roundtable afterwards where we're going to introduce some of those. So that can include just things that can help you track your physical activity, so you can get your movement in during the day, things that give you an alarm to when to take your medication, so that you don't forget and take it at the correct time, and many more. So yeah, we can talk about that later.
We've got time for one more question before a comfort break. So do we have a final question? Oh, over here.
Questions in the room from Bangor?
Just one word, twin. Are there any studies on twins? I'm a twin, I have Parkinson. The twin brother here doesn't have Parkinson. Any studies going on?
So the great question. So for Bangor, the question's about twins.
Parkinson disease is a genetic play, I would say, a role. It doesn't mean that we should not to study the genetic, because it gives us a lot of information to identify some drug targets, some mechanisms in my first slide, but it's what show actually Ann-Kathrin is not necessarily the most useful information, and it's probably more some environmental factors that can play a role on Parkinson.
I'm really pleased to introduce you to Professor Rebecca Crane, who works in the Centre for Mindfulness Research and Practice at Bangor University, and I'll leave you to introduce the rest of your talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. And yeah, such a delight to be here. And hello, Cardiff. Hello, Bangor. It's amazing to have this linkage between the north and the south of Wales. Yeah, so mindfulness and Parkinson's. So in the beginning of 2020 was a really surreal time for all of us as we moved into the lockdown. For me, there was an added layer of having just been diagnosed with Parkinson's. And so I was navigating sort of layers of strangeness, and at a time when the NHS was really quite non-functional for most things other than COVID. I've never been more grateful for my practice, for my mindfulness practice in that time. It was a huge anchor to me. So I guess what I want to share with you is my perspectives on the interface between my experience of moving through early diagnosis of Parkinson's and my personal practice of mindfulness, but also, you know, from the very beginning, I was really interested in the wider implications of what I was noticing in terms of, because my professional work over the last 25 years has been exploring mindfulness clinically for people with depression and a range of other conditions, and teaching mindfulness and training clinicians to offer mindfulness. So, you know, it sparked interest for me in all sorts of ways. And I think the first thing to say is that mindfulness doesn't inoculate us from grief or sadness or loss. You know, that I went through all of those, and I'm sure that they're familiar to many of you. But I guess what I did experience within that was a sense of really allowing myself to feel all of that. And sort of really a sense of that's an understandable response to a really difficult life changing diagnosis. So during that year, I taught a class to 20 people with Parkinson's. In the autumn of that year, I taught an online class, and that was a really powerful experience for me, to be with people who had many more years under their belt of discovering how to live with Parkinson's. And I think they got a lot from it in terms of learning, you know, how to use mindfulness as a lens and a practice to work with their condition as well. But that was really stimulating for me. And I've since then explored more, and with various colleagues in the university, Lucy and Elizabeth and others, exploring whether we might bring together some of these areas around expertise in mindfulness in Bangor on mindfulness, and expertise on Parkinson's, to build on the existing research that is there. There's actually quite a number of trials looking at mindfulness and Parkinson's. So we've been exploring ways in, and we'll have some discussion about that later on. So what I wanted to do today in this very short session is just give you a little mini direct taste of mindfulness, but then also just share some reflections on how that might be relevant to living with the condition. And I hope if there's time that we can have some Q&A around that. So I want to guide 2 mini practices at different moments, very short, to give you a flavor of the different sorts of mindfulness. Mindfulness is a sort of blanket term for a lot of different practices that can be helpful. So I'd like to just guide for just 2 or 3 minutes, a very short grounding practice that helps us come into our body and move out of our thinking mind, which is a way of really connecting with the present moment. So if you're willing, and it's really optional, you can just listen, but you could also listen and try it out. So I'm going to stand to do this because I've been sitting for a while, and I want to stand now. So you could choose to stand if your body needs to move, but sitting is also fine. So basically be comfortable. So just find a comfortable position, and just allow your body to settle into the position that you're in. And you can have your eyes closed or your eyes open. I find that when I close my eyes, it helps to just bring my attention inside my body, which is what we're inviting here. And beginning by just noticing the way that your body is touching the ground. So noticing the contact of maybe your feet on the floor, your legs, your buttocks on the chair, maybe the back of your body against the back of your chair. And just allowing yourself to feel that sense of contact, of gravity. And we're really inviting ourselves to come into our capacity to sense experience, to feel experience, rather than to think about it. So we're really moving in close to the very direct feel of how our body is just now, without judgment, just noticing, it feels like this just now. So gently guiding the attention from these places of connection of the body with the ground up through the body. So just gently feeling your way through the trunk of the body, the shoulders, the neck, into the head, the face. And as you do, just tuning in to the sensations you notice here. You might be noticing movement, stillness, temperature. You might feel the pulse in your body, the breath in the body. So just the normal everyday sensations, but really using them as a doorway into feeling what's here now in the body. And letting your breath just be as it is, letting your whole being be as it is. So mindfulness is really about allowing yourself to be where you're at in this moment. And where we're at isn't always easy. So it's a kindly practice of just really acknowledging the feel of things now. So gently inviting you now to widen out the attention to be aware of sounds in the space around us, my voice, but also other sounds. And if your eyes are closed, inviting you now to gently open your eyes and also include the visual in your awareness. So just taking in what's here to be seen. So all of these are sensations and seeing, hearing, sensing within our body. And in mindfulness, we really use our sensory experience as a way of connecting to experience. And this practice is often where we begin with mindfulness practice. And it's a really helpful gateway into self-regulation, into really just supporting ourselves to move out of our sort of default habit, automatic pilot mode of being into a more deliberate, intentional, choiceful way of being. So we often talk in mindfulness about moving from reactivity, where we're just kind of doing what's sort of the stress habit, into more of a response, reaction to response. So as humans, one of the things that makes us vulnerable to distress and stress is that we have a very highly developed prefrontal cortex, which enables us to be creative, to think, it's what got us all here today. We navigated instructions and, it's what enables all this technical, amazing stuff. But it's also what creates thought patterns that are also unhelpful, thought patterns that are, worries about the future, worries about the past, fears about what's happening now. And our beings are complex, and we also have very ancient threat response within us. And the threat response that we have cannot distinguish between a fierce dog jumping at us or a difficult thought like, I'm not going to be able to cope with this. This is too much. I can't manage. And that will trigger a threat response within us. So stress comes from our own internal thought patterning. And mindfulness is a way of helping us to see that and to be clear of kind of, in a way, how we're making what's already difficult even worse by our internal patterning, by our internal way of responding to experience. And it helps us to begin to navigate more skillfully ways of relating to experience, and particularly difficult experience. And it comes with a lot of kindness. So, you know, living with Parkinson's is not easy, and there's a great deal of need for self-care, self-kindness, generosity to ourselves. And mindfulness is a way, in a way, of deliberately cultivating that, because that's often not our habit. Our habit is often to be quite hard on ourselves, to be quite critical. And mindfulness is really reversing that habit. It's stressful to have Parkinson's. It triggers a whole load of stuff that has to be navigated. But we also know that stress makes Parkinson's harder. It makes it, the symptoms in the moment, I notice that my tremor and my sort of restlessness and become much worse when I'm feeling stressed. My bandwidth is much worse, much lower when I'm feeling stressed. So there's a sort of double whammy where stress is triggered by Parkinson's, but the stress also makes things worse. So any way in on that is going to be helpful. We also know that stress actually is likely to be unhelpful in terms of progression in the long term. So mindfulness is a way of navigating that helps us to calm the system down and to be clearer how we're responding. You can't fix Parkinson's, you can't solve it. We hope one day that there will be a solution, but you know, as it is right now in our day-to-day experience of it, it's not solvable. And that in a way is one of the is the place where practices such as mindfulness are most helpful. It's like, okay, this is as it is. This is my reality. But how do I live my best life within this? How do I live creatively within the reality of this? And we know too that the mental state that we have, the mental orientation that we have, makes a big difference to Parkinson's. So my mindfulness teacher often says to me this phrase, which I love: you're always in a mood. You know how parents say, stop being moody to your children. Well, the reality is you're always in a mood. There's always a mood present of some sort. So it might be a mood of anger, or a mood of restlessness, or a mood of kindness, or a mood of love, or a mood of care. But there's a mood. And that mood makes a big difference to your experience. So we see the world through the lens of the mood that we're in. And this is the work that we've been doing for many years around depression. So it's almost like you've got glasses which have got a tinted lens, and you see the whole world blue or pink, you know, if they've got a lens. So if your mood is criticism, you're going to see everything with a critical eye, yourself, your own experience, but also experience in the world around you. So actually learning to recognize, well, what's the climate inside of me? What sort of mood am I bringing to this moment? Or what's my habit mood that I'm bringing to my experience? And learning that actually that's not fixed. That is something that we can cultivate in the directions that are helpful. So there's a mind state, but there's also a body state. Like right now, each of us is aware, if you turn your attention inwards, you're aware of the feeling within your body. And that might be aversive, it might be unpleasant. You know, if there's a lot of jangling or pain or tension within your body, it's an unpleasant feeling tone. And there's a natural reactivity to that in our system. So our systems are very, very finely tuned to be responsive to what's going on within the system. And again, knowing that response, being aware of it rather than it being a habit response, makes a big difference to how we're then able to be to actually be choiceful around how we are with ourselves. So if we see ourselves getting impatient with ourselves, we can pause and recognize, slow down and reset and pick up in a way that's actually more helpful. So I'd like, how are we doing for time? Yes, we've got time. I'd like to just do another mini practice that really touches into that other aspect of mindfulness. So there's this sort of settling aspect of mindfulness, allowing us to come into the present moment. But there's also this other aspect, which is more about being curious, like, how am I? What's happening here? What am I bringing to what's here in this moment? How might I be more skillful with what's here in this moment? So it's this kind of really active, creative engagement with our experience. So I'd like to guide another practice, but I would like to suggest, and this is a mindfulness thing too, that we actually just move before we do it. So if you're willing, you could do this standing or sitting, but if you're willing to just come to stand, this can just be a way of just bringing some energy into the body. Maybe just kind of having some movements. You might just want to shake the body out a bit, just whatever your body would like just now. Maybe roll the shoulders a little bit. And let the breath flow in the body. So really take some deeper breaths. So just give your body stretch and a move. And then make a decision how you'd like to be for this mini practice. So it's going to be like 2 or 3 minutes again. And you could stay standing, or you could sit, or you could start standing and then sit during it, whatever feels best. So just making a choice about how your body would like to be for the next 2 or 3 minutes. And settling where you've chosen, remembering that it's fine to move if you want to during the practice. And once again, just noticing the feel of the body in this position now, the weight of the body moving down into the ground, through your feet, through your legs and buttocks if you're sitting, and the height of the body lifting up. So a sense of really taking your seat, taking your stand just now in the midst of your life. And bringing your attention from around the body to the inside of the body. So you're really inviting yourself to be aware of yourself from the inside out. And as you bring your attention in, just being curious, how are things just now within your own system? What's the body telling you? What sensations here in the body just now? And how are they shifting as you connect with them? Things are always on the move within our systems, sensations coming and going. And is it possible to bring a friendliness to what's here just now? Mindfulness is, in many ways, a way of being your own best friend. So just meeting your experience with this sense of kindness, with a sense of care. So being interested both in the feel of things within the body and also the mind state of this moment. Like, what am I bringing to this? Is there a sense of care and friendliness, or is there some other flavor that's here at this moment? And so just being curious. How are things just now? And gently breathing with whatever's here just now, allowing it to be as it is. And wherever possible, inviting some ease within the body, some softening. but also not demanding anything. So now as we gently close the practice, maybe taking 2 or 3 longer, deeper, more deliberate breaths. Just taking the breath into the body, filling the lungs with air, and gently letting that breath leave. And really being aware of the feel of those breaths as they move through the body. So yeah, thank you very much. So we've got a very short time, maybe 3 or 4 minutes. So it would be lovely to hear about either any observations of what you noticed in your own experience when we did those practices, or any wider questions, but anything is welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Crane, have you come across the tapping application, and how do you think that would react, and how do you think that would fit in with what you're doing in mindfulness?
Totally, yes. My understanding is, so this is the tapping where you do this, yeah, and yeah. So it comes from Qigong practices, which are wonderful. You know, I think they're really, so there's lots of different ways of doing mindful movement. So basically any movement that we engage in with awareness is mindful movement. And it's another beautiful way to come into the body. And I think also those sorts of practices are really helpful when there's a lot of restlessness in the body or agitation. It's a really nice way of kind of dispersing energy, yeah. And building energy as well, sometimes when your energy's flat, yeah.
Do we have any questions from Cardiff?
Do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes. I've done a useful program on Parkinson's national site as mindfulness session to myself. I wonder if you have any advice for people who might want to set up local groups by this service.
So the question from Cardiff is, there's a very useful resource on the Parkinson's network about mindfulness, and whether you guys have any advice about setting up a network to access those resources.
Yes, let's see, local facilities being made available.
If any local facilities have been made available for this.
Possible for training.
Any kind of training, any educational qualifications, so any kind of ways of getting a network around these mindfulness sessions.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. I'm kind of newbie in the Parkinson's world, so I'm not too familiar with the resources, specific resources that are being spoken about. But I think mindfulness it's much easier to do with each other. And I mean, we can practice. I do practice on my own, but I'm also resourced by coming together with other people. So I think finding ways to connect and support each other to cultivate mindfulness as a way of being is useful. So yeah, it'd really be lovely to do that.
We have another question.
Has there been any research into linking mindfulness with singing and dancing, singing and listening to music? I find that singing out loud or just listening to music is a great stress reliever. But is there any research into the connection between the two?
So the question is, has there been any research into mindfulness and kind of singing and dancing and the positive effects of singing?
I don't know specifically whether there's been research on that. I do know that there's been research on quite a number of different sorts of mindful movement, like Qigong. There's research on that. It would be really interesting to see also whether there's, yeah. I mean, I think there's just a very, you know, the piece I didn't say when I was speaking is that, you know, we know that the one really strongly evidence-based way of supporting ourselves is exercise. And I do think there's a really, there's a very helpful interface between our mindfulness practice and our exercise. That if we engage with our exercise with awareness, I feel it has quite a different experience to it, and this isn't evidence-based, but to me it feels like it's building connections better when there's a real sense of presence and awareness when we're exercising.
Take the final question from Bangor and then we'll take a break for lunch. And for those of you in Bangor, just to say that we've got a small roundtable discussion after lunch where we'll be talking a bit more about some of the mindfulness research, both that's happened in the past and looking forward to some of the research that we'd like to do.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, it's just really whether there's any suggestions or advice in terms of breathing techniques when you're doing the practice. Is there one sort of breathing works better than any other?
So generally speaking, when we practice mindfulness, we have an orientation of kind of letting ourselves be. So we're not deliberately changing the breath in any way. That said, actually, as we bring awareness to our breath, there are things that can be helpful in terms of, we know when we're chest breathing, shallow, rapid chest breathing is likely to lead to more agitation in the body, whereas deeper, slower breathing that comes down into your belly is likely to be more calming. And I often, start and end a mindfulness session with some longer, deeper breaths that right through the whole body, and then let my breath kind of just settle. So I think it's worth reflecting on how breath has an influence on us, because it is powerful. It actually really changes our physiology, how we breathe. Thank you.
Well, hasn't it been an exciting day? And I'm sure it must have been too for our colleagues in Bangor. And really pleased that we've managed to put it together and that it's been both informative but also a bit of fun. So what I would like to do now is introduce a volunteer colleague from the Wales Research Interest Group, who is going to close the session for all of us. So that's Roger.
Croeso I pawb. Prynhawn, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you, Anna, for your kind introduction. Yes, I'm Roger Morley Jones, a volunteer with the All Wales Rig. I got involved because my wife Diane was diagnosed some 7 years ago with, you guessed it, of course, Parkinson's. I hope I can speak for all of you, both here in Cardiff and in Bangor as well, in saying what a marvellous day we've had. It's certainly gone very quickly, and we've had a range of wonderful experiences. Let's put our hands together again and say a very big thank you to everyone. I think it's important before we finally close today, if we just take a few minutes just to reflect on the day itself. We've had the opportunity to question the researchers, but perhaps to reflect on the format of the day, of what you will take away from it, and any questions perhaps you have in relation more particularly with the work of Parkinson's and also of the Wales Rig. Because one thing we are very anxious to do, and I will return to this theme, is to get you, all of you, wherever you are in this wonderful country of Wales, involved. This rig is about you. It is about us, researchers and those with Parkinson's and those who are alongside them, their loved ones. So Lucy, can I come to you first in Bangor, if you can hear me? And do you have any questions or reflections from our colleagues up in the north, please?
So any questions from Bangor? I could come around again with the microphone, questions or reflections from the room.
You're all very quiet. You've had a good lunch like us in Cardiff.
I think, Rebecca, I'll bring the microphone.
Thanks, Lucy. I mean, just really to say how amazing it is that we're all found a way to come together, and it doesn't happen accidentally. And it's just really worth it. It's so, there's so much that can happen when we're here in person, having conversations side by side. So I just put in a plug for this to happen again, because this is how things evolve and ideas start being cultivated and the enthusiasm grows. So it's, yeah, just a big thank you to everybody who's been involved.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, this is the second event of this nature, and our first was very much focused here in Cardiff. We've taken that next step now to look at all of Wales, and it's lovely to hear your support, and I'm sure you speak for everybody there. I turn then to our colleagues at this point in Cardiff. Are there any observations or reflections? Yes.
It's been brilliant. It's been really fantastic. For the young now, I was involved in a drug trial for Parkinson's, and it went wrong after, and I felt very alone and very isolated. Nobody at all asked me, was I okay? I was just totally forgotten about, and that's really sad.
I'm sure we're all very sorry to hear that.
I liked that drug trial.
Yes. Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah, we can all empathise with you, I'm sure. I know the point was made earlier about feedback when research has been undertaken, but I think this is a relevant point to recognise you're not alone. There are contacts both through the Wales Cymru, through Anna and her colleagues, and equally through Liz Nash, who isn't here, but I'm sure Liz is watching. You know, you have to speak up. Yeah. Yeah.
And talking to all the researchers has been amazing.
Yeah, lovely.
It's really good.
Thank you very much for that comment. Lucy, can we turn to you again? Is there any observation, please?
Any more questions or reflections from Bangor? Anna, I will bring the microphone.
Yes, that's all right. You're getting some extra.
I'm getting my steps in.
Yes, Slovak.
I just wanted to say thank you to everyone, really, because it's been so nice chatting to you all. And I think as a researcher, you can't do research without people. So it's really essential to actually get to talk to people, and you can learn so much from just talking to people. So just a thank you from me, really.
Well, that's lovely. I think one of the messages we want to get across today, and in all the activities of Parkinson's UK, wherever they are, is to get involved and make your contribution. So diolch yn fawr chi. Thank you very much. Turning again to Cardiff then, is there anybody else here?
Yes, Roger.
Yes, thank you, David.
Just one thing, I think all the presentations are first class, and the sessions in outside as well were very informative. But as I said to Lana, what would be helpful would be is if somebody could draw the linkages between all those strands of research, so they're joined up in a way which is cohesive, meaningful, and relevant to the people in this room.
Lovely. I think that's a good point for us to take away, and we will put on our agenda on Monday when we meet as a RIG to actually, discuss the outcomes of today. Thank you. Can I just try and be fair and go north again? Lucy, are there any more? Because I have two colleagues with their arms raised here, if not.
I think you can go to the colleagues in the south. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Ken.
Just a question, one of our aims is to spread awareness of Parkinson's, let people know as soon as we can about Parkinson's. I found the first of the talks about early indicators, in particular this use of smartphone, to be very helpful. But it's a question of ethics. What I would like to see is a samba band playing in Queen Street or St Mary Street just before an international match just happened, and people saying, "What on earth is that?" And coming across and saying, "What are you doing?" You can tell them, get them and tell them about Parkinson's.
Yeah.
But another way of attracting their attention, I don't know whether it's allowed or possible, would be to put aside saying, "What's your chances of getting Parkinson's?" So somebody comes in, "Well, what are my chances?" There were the lady's first presentation about the various indicators. Do you smoke? Do you do this? Do you do that? Do you any sources of pesticide? Because we can't give you an accurate diagnosis, but you've fulfilled a few of the characteristics. Keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
But being non-medical people, are we allowed to consider?
Okay, thank you very much, Ken. I know you're always a great advocate for giving as much publicity as we possibly can, and there's some more positive ideas for us to take away. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. I can't introduce you. Okay, lovely.
Just want to have some fantastic information today. It really has been great. Took my eyes to what's going on and made me feel positive about the future. but I for one won't be able to remember all these. Can I?
Roger, would it be all right to repeat the commentary from people in the audience in Cardiff? We just can't
Yeah,
hear as clearly from the audience.
A very good point, Lucy. Yes, thank you. We don't have a roving mic. I'm not as fit as you see. The one observation was related by Ken to the Samba band, but by implication, the publicity and getting people aware of, for example, what are the chances of this happening to you? Do you know about Parkinson's and those sort of related issues? And the one which we've now come to is the fact there's been so much wonderful information available today. How can we, in a sense, take it away and make sense of it all?
Are we going to get some information by email or whatever?
Yeah, okay.
It's going to collate and create CDs with contact details and
Sure.
all that stuff on it.
That's lovely. We're talking about outcomes and how the basic context and content of today can be pulled together and then shared. Was that fair? Lucia?
I'll try because, well, next week I really put a lot in my calendar to send all the links that we sent in this last slide about how to join the Welsh Research Intergroup or participate in research. And also, hopefully in the next weeks, we are able to process the recordings from today and share also the scientific talks we recorded if you want to listen again. And any other information you want to gather or questions you have related to research, you can email Parkinson's UK again, and she has contacts with other researchers in Wales to divert your question if they are not able to answer.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Lucia. Well, I will at that point then. I can see no hands here. I'm assuming, oh, sorry, Irwin.
I just put my hand up, sir.
Yeah, okay, Irwin, yeah.
I just wanted to say the trend is now that funding authorities, people who fund research, want to see people with Parkinson's involved in planning that research right from the beginning of the process. And through the rig is one way of doing it. There's such a variety of it. When you heard it today, such a huge different approaches from different things that are working at the cell level, or working at the whole person level, or working at the community level, even with Parkinson's. So you can't keep abreast of everything, but if there's something you're particularly interested in, then your views are really, really important. So through the rig, perhaps you might, put that forward. The lovely researchers here are very open. It's not true anyway. Sometimes you have to knock on the door, but here we've got an opportunity where people are willing to hear what we've got to say. So please, say it.
Yeah, Irwin. Irwin was just making a point for friends up in the north about getting involved. Researchers are always open to having people with Parkinson's, etc., involved in their research. If you have something that you want to get across, you want to get involved, then we know that researchers will most welcome it. One of the things that they have to look at particularly is what we call PPI involvement. And I know in that sense, those of you with Parkinson's, wherever you may be, have a lot to contribute, and it will be welcomed. Irwin. So then, I think it would be fair to say, don't you, that the Wales Research Interest Group and its partnership, particularly with the research community, demonstrates today, particularly through this first, and I say first because I'm sure there will be many more, dual event, how well organized, creative, and particularly resolute every one of us is to take this forward. We've had the opportunity, haven't we, to learn from one another. And most importantly, it's about people, isn't it? We've made some connections. I've written down a couple of email addresses of researchers who want to get in touch and to perhaps contribute, to get involved, to inform and to be informed oneself. And I know in our opening remarks that Pat particularly made a plea, and I want to reinforce that plea, that message that he made at the start of the day. We want you. You are part of this Parkinson's community, and to get involved with RIG, the Welsh Research Interest Group. We'd love to welcome you as new members and to hear from you about your ideas. And that is very straightforward and easy to do. We have your email addresses. If you can contact Liz Nash or Anna, Liz Nash is a name you may well know in London, and tell her, then she will put you on that list and we can tell you when we have our meetings. They are by Zoom, I'm afraid, and all of us perhaps face challenges even the experts today with technology. But we meet, we talk, and we are anxious to work together as a whole and a wider team. So what next after today? Well, for people who weren't able to attend today, we will be putting an online event to include many others. More details and the date will be announced. But can I at this point give a few thank yous? And there's a danger when you give thank yous, you might miss somebody out. And I do apologize if I miss a group out. It is not meant, I assure you. I want to support everybody involved with RIG in the first instance. The staff at Parkinson's UK, London, but particularly here in Wales under the direction of Anna. Our presenters, thank you especially. And some of you did a double dosage, didn't you? Not only did you stand here, but you actually came and sat amongst us. And that, I think, was a most successful activity. For the organisation and the delivery of the sessions today, it's been absolutely marvellous. And also, let's not forget the organisers of the community activities for such a stimulating experience. I speak particularly of the Sparky Samba. Have you ever experienced anything like that in your life before? I bet you can't wait for the next time. You've had a flyer on it. Go along if you can, enjoy, yeah. Everybody welcome. And you know what's more? Cardiff today, Barcelona in July. It's true. They've already had a poster, an academic poster accepted for the World Parkinson's Conference, and you're actually going. I'm tempted to ask, how many weeks do I have to attend before I can come to Barcelona? But there we are. We wish you well. Yeah, we wish you well and every success in your venture. Can I also thank colleagues from AbilityNet for bringing valuable information for our perusal today as well. And particularly a big thank you to all of you who were involved in as participants, as members of the audience, both in Bangor and of course here in Cardiff. And can I say a thank you also, Lucia, particularly personally, for the lunch and all of the refreshments. My word, I haven't eaten so well for a long time. No offense, Diane.
Well, I'm glad you like it.
Yes, I just hope between here and Kidwelly I can stay awake on the motorway as I drive us home. But I want to end particularly with two personal thank yous on behalf of you all. The one is to you, Lucy in Bangor. Thank you so much for all that you've done to facilitate today, both previously and particularly on it today itself. And to you, Lucia, as well. Thank you. Without you, this wouldn't have been at all possible. And I don't know what coercion you did on your colleagues, but to come in and work on us today as well, it's absolutely marvellous. And I know, because I worked in an academic climate for 5 years, you've been drawn away from other more purposeful and focused activities. Don't you believe it? This is what your research is all about, these people who are here today. And so I conclude by saying, I hope that those of you who have far to go or even short to go, have a safe journey home. And more particularly, we look forward to seeing you either on Zoom with Rick or at our next function. Diolch yn fawr a chi. Thank you so much. Hwyl fawr. Goodbye.